Welcome to At His Feet podcast. This is a place where we always say that we simplify the truth. And, last week I preempted that we indeed will want to look at the origin of man in our discussion on the doctrines of creation and man. We want to look at the origin of man. And we have here an amazing pastor, like I said last week, that I'm now not introducing him as a guest, but also as a host. So Pastor Kip, karibu sana. Welcome
Asante.
once again.
Thank you so much.
Yes, how are you feeling?
Yeah, feeling good.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure to be here. Yeah, really enjoy these discussions.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, cutting from the last discussion or the last discussion that we had on creation and what creation is, and we came to that point of now God creating man. And, while we will be talking about what it means to be created in God's image. The question is, where did man come from?
Where did man come from?
Yes.
That's an easier question compared to where did God come from.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. I thought it was a difficult one. But
very easy because that assumes the existence of God. And because God exists,
Yes.
it is easy to explain the existence of man.
Awesome.
God created man. And this discussion funnels very well from the discussion that we had last week, because last week we talked about, creation generally. But then when you look at God doing his work of creation, at the very end, the climax of God's creation is him creating man and woman. And we see, some people ask about the two accounts of creation. In the what has been called famously, the second account of creation, we see God giving the details of how he created man, out of the dust, and creating woman out of the rib of man. And the details are given therein. Yeah.
By the way, now that you've talked about the two accounts of creation, how do you harmonize that in terms of creation of man?
I actually don't think there's anything to harmonize because they already complement each other.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the first account in chapter 1 gives almost the general overview of creation happening. And then the second account of creation fills in the details, to the skeleton that has already been given in chapter 1. A good example is, in chapter 1, it tells us, let us make man in our own image and likeness. And in our own image and likeness, God created man. But then in chapter 2, we actually see now the process of how this happened. God forming man out of the dust, and then putting man into a deep sleep, and then, taking one of his ribs and then forming woman. So we have details that are given in chapter 2. They do not compete with each other, these two accounts. They complement each other. And verses in chapter 2 fill in the gaps in chapter 1. And that's a stylistic device that the Hebrew mind was used to. It's foreign to us because that's not probably how we do and write our things. But back in the day, that's how people would write their stuff. Yeah, they would have several accounts that complement each other. Yeah.
Now, you're talking about when I asked you, where did man come from? You say that's an easy question because after acknowledging who is God, then it's easy to go about man. And of course, you know that the evolution theorists, they believe that there is a way a man came, coming, progressing through from one level or one status to another, and, assuming that, according to them, this happened way before, like they're talking about 65 million years. Yeah. So how do we harmonize the easier part for a pastor and the scientific part? Yes.
Even this theory of evolution is always evolving in itself. The theory itself is always evolving. And this is because, if you tell one lie, you have to tell other lies to patch up, and you'll keep on doing the same over and over again. But the theory of evolution is something that has been refuted, not just even by Christian theologians and apologists, by themselves, because there's a lot of disagreement, contradictions amongst themselves, so that it is hard, for the theory to hold water. But the theory of evolution vis-a-vis the creation account, they really cannot be harmonized, because we see when God created man, he did not create a different form of animal, and then this animal, evolved, through what they call natural selection. And then over time, by, specialization, and all those, and then eventually he became, a complete human being. That's not what happened.
As you continue, let me just read what I got something very, very interesting.
Okay.
According to them, someone says, this, in fact, someone said, this is a very weird thinking, that to the evolutionists, the starting of life began in an organic molecules that underwent a natural transformation through the electricity and heat, or heat, to become organic molecules. These binding blocks joined to form macromolecules chains that eventually made up an organism. And so we became man.
You became man, yeah. So big words that have been used there, but simply put, it's something that's even an impossibility. If you read scientists themselves, even when they are trying to establish the probability of evolution being true, it's almost an impossibility, for such a thing to have happened. Secondly, one of the most important methods of arriving at knowledge, scientifically speaking, is through observation, right? Now, if the theory of evolution is subjected, to scrutiny based on observation, then who is this person who observed the animals, and the molecules evolving, from simple forms to become complex forms? They do not have that data with them. So it is unscientific for them to claim that the evolution theory is scientific. It contradicts itself and collapses, by its own weight. So to the person who is curious, upon examination, you'll actually realize that the evolution theory, does not hold water. If we came from, chimpanzees or other forms of life,
it looks like an insult.
Yeah, and we have looked at we have many of them in existence today. Why are they not evolving, to become human beings? What stopped that from happening?
You are trying to imagine the chimpanzees, the monkeys in Kitale. One day they just knock at your door and say, "Hey, I've become a man now."
Yeah, that would be very interesting. Something that might not, it will never happen. Yes.
So what can we tell? Because I know there are many young people who are really excited about science, and they are faithful followers of At Its Sweet podcast, and they have been wondering, even this question, they are really wondering, hey, how can I get to know the truth? How can we help these young ones who are passionate about science? And of course, we've also told them to do science subjects. Yeah,
it's a good thing, but they should understand the place that science holds. Science is just a discipline that should help us to study what God has created. So that once we study chemistry, we are studying, it's not a thing that we have created, but what God has created, and we want to understand how they operate. When we look at physics, we want to understand how physical features, operate. But it's not something that we have invented, but it is trying to understand the creation of God. And so we should study such a discipline with humility, and also acknowledging the place of God and the authority of God, even as we do so. Several 100 years ago, theology was known as the queen of sciences.
Yes.
Yeah, it's because it was known as a discipline
Our
that has to
producers should hear that.
Yeah, as a discipline that produces, that enables us to, make contact with the truth. Yeah, it's only in these days that we have undermined, theology and anything that has to do with religion. But back in the day, guys actually knew that truth is from God. The truth is of God, and it is our relationship with God that helps us to, understand His truth correctly. So even when you talk about man, ourselves, for us to understand ourselves, we have to look at what God has said concerning us, so that we can have a correct understanding of.
So is it safe to believe in both? And there's a Christian who he wrote the following words. Says, I agree with both arguments, that is evolutionist argument and
And the biblical
and the
argument.
biblical arguments.
Yeah.
I believe in both arguments to a certain degree. And then he said, as a scientist, it is hard to discard tangible evidences that shows life has evolved across species.
Yeah, so that's a claim.
Yeah, then he continues, yet as a Christian, my life is centered on faith in God. I believe that God created life, but I believe God did it in a way that uses evolution. I believe that God created everything in 6 days, but that each day, of course, is going back to our discussion the last time, each day lasted millions of years. With different species and life forms evolving through that era. What do you think? What do you think about this?
Yeah, the problem with that is you will begin making compromises on the biblical text. Now, how far will you go with that? If you, one of the basic assumptions, that are within that claim is that the accounts of creation, the first chapters of Genesis, are not literal. That's you really have to believe they are not literal in order for you to harmonize the theory of evolution and the biblical doctrine of creation. Now that becomes a problem because once you open the gates to claim that Genesis is not literal, you have opened the floodgates of compromise. And you will end up treating biblical texts as, not what they claim to say. So that you will end up saying, Adam and Eve were not literal human beings. And if you overstretch that, like we said last week, you might end up even talking about gender as being fluid, so that gender is not really biological, but it is sociological. It is the society that assigns gender and not biology that determines whether I'm male or female. And so you read those claims back to the Bible, and you end up doing what one of your favorite words, eisegesis, where you read things into the Bible instead of reading things out of the Bible. Yeah, so it's a dangerous place to be in, and it's a slow fade. You might start compromising one by one. There's this song which says it's a slow fade when black and white turn to gray.
Which songs do you hear?
It's a gospel song. Actually. It is.
Who are your authors? Okay, go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, so I'd say it is important for us to simply take God at his word. Yeah. Simply take God at his word. When God says that, he created 6 24-hour days, then he actually did that. It is not impossible for God to do that. The problem is when we try to harmonize, what is at present with what is in the past. And we do not want to revise our present understanding of things, but we want to revise our understanding of the Bible.
And what is your comment about his first part? Are you saying that I believe in God, I believe in evolution, I believe that God created the world, but he created it in such a way that it allows for evolution?
I don't think there is any evidence from the Bible that actually shows that God worked his creation through the process of evolution. Yeah, if you look at him creating man and woman, it is him working with dust and fashioning man out of it, working with the rib of a man and fashioning Eve out of it. There wasn't a process of evolution and natural selection happening in order for them to come to be. And after that, we see just human beings procreating. And we are told that each brought forth, as of its kind. So that if a horse and a horse came together, a horse was produced. It wasn't something of a simple life form that would evolve and after thousands of years would become a horse. No, that's not what happened.
But now some people have said creation is more than just the creation of a man or origin of man. It's just should not only be understood as the existence of man, but also in the way man is evolving. So someone is saying, how will you then explain the way the man is evolving to be more to be more knowledgeable, more technological, more global in perspective?
Oh yeah,
yes,
yeah. I think I get it now. I think that's a confusion of categories where we are mixing up categories because when you talk about creation, that's a different category. When we talk about progress, that's a different category. So that creation is God himself, bringing man into being. But man has been created with capabilities. which God himself has put in him, the capability of making progress. And God himself has, made man to be teachable, to be creative. And so we can keep on improving, with what God has already created. So that today we see, advancement in technology. We see, advancement in the medical world. And it's because God has given us a mind, and this mind is creative, so that we can work with what is already there in order to, become better and make a better society. But that's a different category. That's a category of just progress based on man who already exists. But when it comes to how man exists, that's a different category that evolution cannot really explain.
Yeah, I really like the way you are categorizing that. I hope you've heard the bit of people now trying to create man.
Oh yeah, human cloning or something. I don't know what they call it.
What is? Should we? How would you explain that in terms of understanding God as a creator? Original man is only in God's creation.
Yeah, so that's a question of ethics, I think. Yeah, like whether it's ethical to do that.
Yeah.
So two questions of ethics and possibility. Is it possible actually for man to clone? So they can clone a body. Is it possible for man to create a soul? That's a question that you need to think about. Yeah.
You very soon you will be a host. So when you ask question, I'm starting to fear because you may want me to respond. But
maybe that's a question we need to think about. Is it possible for man to create a soul? At the moment, we don't have any evidence for that. Yeah. So they might make attempts, but I don't think they are going to be successful at that. Yeah. Yeah. But sometimes it might reflect a measure of arrogance, just showing that we also want to take the place of God, and do his work. But the possibility of it is extremely minimal. I am not sure if they are going to be successful at creating a human soul. They might attempt to clone a human body, but a human soul, I highly doubt that is going to be.
And the human body can operate like human, but not without a soul.
Yeah. But with great limitations. And so you're left to wonder if that is a human being, because it is only after God had breathed into man that he became a living soul.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are huge questions, and I think we will be battling these over and over. And very soon, there's a friend of mine who's been challenging me to bring in a morality on this podcast. So maybe very soon we will get into those ethical issues around creation and around God, and if see how that works. Now, I also, maybe you've heard, some people have done some research that there are some people who are living in some planet, or they don't say people, they say some creation.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. and the question is, are these people like us, or like human beings, or how are they? And some actually are, they think that they look more like chimpanzees. And
man, I don't know. Straight up, I don't know. I only watch these things in movies.
Yes.
Loved reading novels. So when I was in high school, I'd read novels. A guy called Dan Brown, another guy called Sidney Sheldon. Fiction, of course, but they would make claims that those, whatever they are writing, even though it's fiction, it's based on things that are true. So that I don't know the US, and these are conspiracy theories.
You've heard that actually.
I don't know the US, has a base somewhere, and we have aliens that visited the earth, and they are taking care of them there. If those claims are true or not, I don't know. If I say I know,
but they are just claims.
Yeah, but they are just claims. Now, if they are true, they are part of God's creation. That's what I'd say, because there is nothing which exists that wasn't created by God. And the universe of God is so big and vast. We haven't discovered, a greater percentage of God's universe. And man is, every day discovering, part of God's creation. So if we discover there are other living organisms that are close to resembling human beings somewhere, if that's a big if, I'd say they still belong to, what God created.
We don't know their category. We don't know who they are.
Yeah.
I was actually asked by one of our youths here in church, and asked me my thinking about that. But this is what I said: if those creation. I don't want to call them
Creatures.
The aliens. If they have never evolved to be man, because I'm supposing if they are somewhere, they should actually, if they are basing the argument on evolution theory, they should by now evolve to be like me.
Yeah.
But if they are not evolving to be like me, they die the way they are, then we can only conclude with what you have said. They are God's creation in a different perspective. And they exist the way they are until the moment of death.
Yeah. I'd agree with that totally.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, this is just a discussion. We just wanted to know where God men came from. And I think your responses are really great. And it is good for us, and it is enough for us to really believe that we came from God, and to believe that indeed God is the one who created us. But I don't know, maybe why should we believe that? Why should a young person believe that? Why should a Christian contend for that truth? What will be wrong if they think otherwise?
First, if a person thinks otherwise, then they are believing a lie. And we have the responsibility of believing, number one, understanding the truth, number two, believing the truth, and thirdly, contending, for the truth that has been entrusted to us once and for all. So it's important because it has to do with, what God has said. And it is our responsibility to actually believe what God has said. Number two, it has to do with who we are. It is the doctrine of man, humanity, human beings. So if I do not understand myself correctly, then my chances of functioning in God's word correctly are also minimal.
I like that.
But if you understand yourself correctly, then you're going to function appropriately in the world of God. You're going to understand, how your mind functions. You're going to understand how you should relate with other people. You're going to understand, what marriage is. You're going to understand what it means to, offend other people, the concept of forgiveness and all that. You're going to understand that we are fallen creatures. We are sinful. And so we shouldn't expect perfection, from anyone else. And thousands upon thousands of many other things concerning us. So a lot is at stake in relation to our understanding of the doctrine of man.
Yeah. Oh, I think that's very powerful, Pasi. Thank you. Thank you for that. Like, if we really don't understand who we are, then we have compromised every other thing that we do, or the way we are, and every other thing. And I think that is very powerful for us, Pasi. I know that was a powerful. It sounded like the last word, but I want to give you an opportunity to
it's not the last word. Okay.
To give your last parting shot on this bit of and especially looking at evolution theory versus creation theory in terms of the origin of man.
Yeah. I just say what I already said before, that we have several competing schools of thought when it comes to us trying to understand where we came from. But I'd say that there's one that the Bible affirms, that there is a creator, and that is God. And he created man and woman in his image and likeness. And what that does is that it gives you dignity. Once you understand that we are created in the image of God, it means that all human beings have value. All human beings have dignity. If we say that we have come from, whether it's through the Big Bang Theory and then evolution and whatnot, then we do not have any authority to claim that human beings have dignity and have value. And moral concepts collapse from then henceforth. But once we understand that we are created by God in his own image, I do understand that we are created, with value and dignity, and we have, a duty to protect the innocent. We have a duty to fight against abortion, because we believe even the young ones who are, in the wombs of their mothers are still possessing the image of God.
Awesome.
And that creates a better place once we live with that understanding.
And I think that is a very good place to end it, because in the next episode, we are talking about what does it mean to be in the image of God? What does it mean to be in the image of God? And I think that we will pick up from that point. Friends, I picked from what Pastor Kip said. If we have a wrong view of who we are and where we came from, then we have a wrong view of everything about us. And so we need to contend ourselves with this perspective that God indeed created man. And he created man by using everything about him. In fact, I really like the way you said in our first episode of creation that he qualifies when he created man, that it was very good. So we are very good, very well created by God. And we will be looking at in the next episode, what does it really indeed mean to be in the image of God? And I think that is very comforting. That is heart-lifting. Until next time, thank you for being part of At His Feet podcast. This is a biblical doctrine segment. And as I always say, we also have a beautiful segment called the Steadfast Pursuit segment, which is our youth-led segment. Until next time, thank you and God bless you.